Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it's my number 29 team in my 2024 NFL Deep Dive Series. It's the Tennessee Titans. Make sure to hit the like and leave a comment on this video. It really helps out with the algorithms, pushes it out to more people, helps this channel out tremendously, and subscribe if you haven't already. There's still a whole lot of teams to go. 3 teams have already been done, maybe more by the time you're watching this. I am filming this in bulk, so if a trade or a major free agency signing happens a day after or a day before the videos are released, I probably don't have it in there. I do my best to try to keep it current, but you know, your boy's got a day job, a 9 to 5er, so subscribe and then I'll have more time for this, because then I'll start getting paid. But right now I'm doing it for fun. I hope you guys have fun watching this. The Tennessee Titans could low-key be a really fun team to watch this year, mostly because I feel like it's going to be maybe a lot of high-scoring games. Will Levis showed the signs of being a really good quarterback at some point soon later. Had great moments. You know, now you've given him Calvin Ridley and you've given him Tyler Boyd, so you've amped up the receiving game for him. You also added J.C. Latham in the first round, who was a bit of a reach. I gotta say, it was a bit of a reach. You know, he's giving a lot of Evan Neal vibes, and as a New York Giants fan, that is not necessarily a great thing. They got rid of Derrick Henry. They brought in Tony Pollard, who I think is going to serve as much more of an effective 3-down back than Derrick Henry was. And that's not taking anything away from Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is just a very unique specimen, and I just think that it's not as much of a downgrade as people think. I think it, you know, you lose a little bit obviously in the run game, losing Derrick Henry, but you gain a little bit in the passing game, because I like Tony Pollard coming out of the backfield a little bit in that aspect. And then you got Tajay Spears, who's a good little compliment for him as well. They got Lloyd Cushenberry to play center, so they've gotten their quarterback, their center. I really like that move. Lloyd Cushenberry really came into his own last year in Denver under Sean Payton, and you're just hoping that they can sustain that, because they've definitely made the shift now to being a more offensive-oriented team, getting rid of Mike Vrabel and bringing in Brian Callahan from the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, Brian Callahan, you can say what you want about him. I don't really know. I don't know if he showed enough to be a head coach. I'll just say that. He brought his dad with him to coach the offensive line, so that's a big positive. But is he going to be the guy who turns it all around? I mean, you can give him credit for Joe Burrow, but can you really? Is that not Zach Taylor? Is this going to be a whole, like, oh, it really was him the whole time? Or is it going to be like a Josh McDaniels situation where it's like, yeah, of course he was great, you know, you give him greatness and then you expect him to be a head coach without the greatness. Of course, bad things were going to happen, but it also shifts things over the defensive side of the ball. What's that going to look like? Now they've changed a little bit of things up here and there in terms of personnel and of course the coaching staff, but the coaching staff is where we're going to start. Let's dive in here, because it's a difference maker. So Brian Callahan is my 30th ranked head coach coming into this season. Coming over, he's got a lot of coaching experience. You know, most recently, like we said, served under Zach Taylor in Cincinnati. He's like a second generation coach with his dad, Bill Callahan, who infamously was the head coach of the post John Gruden Raiders back in the day. He's a really good offensive line coach, though. Can't take anything away from him in that aspect. He came over with him as well. He also brought over who is right now the 31st ranked offensive coordinator, Nick Holtz. You know, gets a 69 grade, which I guess is kind of cool. But he spent last year as the passing game coordinator for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I mean, were they that great? I don't know. And he spent 10 years with the Raiders, mostly on the wide receiver side. So him being able to work with Calvin Ridley for a second straight year, even though, didn't really get the most out of Calvin Ridley. But, after a year off, it's hard to, I would say it's hard to expect Calvin Ridley to have been some giant big-time wide receiver. And this is one of the better wide receiver rooms he's going to be working with, at least on paper. So there is something there. He was an offensive quality control coach for the University of Nebraska for a while, and I think for the University of Colorado as well. But when you don't have that offensive coordinator background, and also he wasn't somebody that was necessarily associated with Brian Callahan in Cincinnati in his previous role. And usually what you'll see is when a coordinator gets hired to be a head coach, he'll generally bring some position coaches that he had from the previous team he was on and promote one of them. And that just didn't happen here with Brian Callahan. He also has an offensive assistant, Keelan Butler, who was already a member of the Titans organization, so he's kept him in-house. His dad is the one that he brought, who just make him his offensive line coach. I'm assuming his dad doesn't want to be the offensive coordinator. That's probably why. But his assistant offensive line coach is coming over from the University of Kansas. The quarterback coach, Bo Hardigree, he was just with the Raiders. So there's really, it's like a mishmash right here of a coaching staff, which is why they are ranked for me the way that they are. It doesn't seem like, other than the Callahans, a lot of people seem to be working with each other for the first time. So it is very difficult for me to rank these coaching staffs outside of like a bottom three staff, because how do you have any faith in them at all here on the offensive side of the football? It just seems potentially chaotic early in the season here. Then you got Denard Wilson, who actually is my 17th ranked defensive coordinator, which is relatively high. He spent the last, I think the last like 9 seasons as a defensive backs coach. Last year he was with the Baltimore Ravens, so he's coming over, bringing over that style of defense that they just had last year with the number 1 defense in the entire league. So that's what he's bringing over. So that's why he gets that high ranking for me, because if he's bringing over the scheme of a defensive coordinator that would otherwise be ranked at least in the top 5 to be a position coach to put his own little spin on it, I think that could still put him in the middle of the pack here, and help out some of these more hybrid type players like an Elijah Molden, for example. He gets a Monty Hooker in the secondary as well, to go along with Chidobe Awuzie is there, and there's a number of other people that they have working in that secondary. He gets Harold Landry and Arden Key as his edge rushers. He gets Jeffrey Simmons and then Tavondre Sweat, who fell in this draft. So he's got some interesting talent here he's going to have to find some roles for. But if implementing that Baltimore Ravens scheme, I think could be very, very effective, and is going to keep this team at, I would say, at least competitive, while this offensive staff figures out what the hell is even going on and figures out how the other people think and everything. That's generally a hurdle, like I said, that you don't want to have coming into a brand new team, is having all the coaches trying to learn about each other at the same time that the players are. So that's why it's tied for 29th for me. The defensive, again, Denard Wilson and the defensive staff kind of raises this up significantly. But I think it's going to be a bumpy start, I think, specifically on the offensive side of the ball when it comes to scheme and execution and understanding and all that. I'd be very surprised if they didn't have coaching point struggles, not necessarily player issues, player struggles, because I do think that they have the talent out there, as we'll see. So let's start with quarterback Will Levis, who is tied for 24th for me, gets a 78 grade. Had a little sample size last year, had some ups, had some downs. You expect that from a rookie. Now that he's getting the keys to the kingdom here, He is having to learn a brand new system. So that kind of negates probably some of the progress that he would have made otherwise based upon last year. New calls, new terminology, all that kind of stuff. So it does cause him to take a little step back, I think, initially. But this is also, you look at the amount of games that he played and the amount, it's almost like rookie year 2.0 coming up. Again, especially with the brand new staff. But if they can implement, he's got some better arm strength than what we saw from Joe Burrow. He's obviously not nearly as accurate. So to find within that success that Joe Burrow had in Cincinnati under Callahan and Taylor, it'll be interesting to see what that initial first 5 games, I would say, looks like in terms of their play calling, their strategizing, play design, and whatnot to get Will Levis going. Because I do think that as he progresses, he will clean up a lot of the issues they had. And I'm not even saying that Will Levis is not an accurate passer either. I'm comparing him to Joe Burrow just because of the coaches and the schemes that are coming in. He's also, I think, very safe in his role. Malik Willis, just doo-doo. Mason Rudolph comes in. I think Mason Rudolph last year established himself as a pretty good backup for a backup role, but don't get it twisted. This is Will Levis's team. How he utilizes the plethora of weapons that he has now, he really is spoiled for that. So that's going to really help him come along, I think, in his progression throughout the season in particular. And I think that late in the year, I would look for this Titans team to be the team that nobody wants to play. Those playoff bubble teams are really going to be looking at their schedule and hoping to not see the Titans on it, because I think early in the year they might be a bit of a punching bag for all the reasons that I've listed right now, especially with Will Levis, basically a glorified rookie quarterback, finding his way in a new system. Once he finds the way, if he can find his way halfway, 3/4 of the way through the season, this could be a really dangerous team and really change the projection of what they could be next year. I just think right now you're dealing with a lot of the growing pains, and Will Levis is going to be in the front and center of those growing pains that this Titans offense in particular is going to have. They do have one of the better backfields in the entire NFL. They are tied for 6th for me in the whole league. It's Tony Pollard, who gets a 90 grade. Tajay Spears gets an 81. It's a great 1-2 punch to have. I was really high on Tajay Spears when he came out. I thought he was a perfect complement for Derrick Henry. Don't really know how this complements now with Tony Pollard there, but he's still a good number 2 running back who, for all intents and purposes, could play himself into maybe being a hot commodity in free agency for a team that's looking for a starter, depending on the type of system that they're running. They drafted Dylan Johnson and Jabari Small, or picked them up as rookies. Dylan Johnson is going to be a pretty solid third down back here, or third string back. I think he's really under the radar as being one of those really unthought of running backs who could break out and find a real solid role for himself. I'm not saying he's going to take over for either one of these guys, but I think if Tajay Spears, ends up on the injured list, or if Tony Pollard doesn't, Spears has to go in, I don't think you're going to be too upset for a game or two having Dylan Johnson as your backup first, second down back. Julius Chestnut, Hassan Haskins have been there for a while. They aren't going to really contribute all that much on first and second down. Jabari Small, I would throw him in there as well. I think Jabari Small is probably on the roster bubble, given that. Even in the receiving game, and this is why I would put Jabari Small there. He's like the worst of the receiving backs, so he's not really a high-end first, second down guy that you're going to take over the top 3 backs that you have. And Haskins and Chestnut, they got some experience as well. I think they'll be mostly competing for that special team spot there at the end. But you get the 12th best receiving back as well, and that's Tony Pollard, 76 And Tajay Spears gets a grade of a 75. So they're pretty much, I would say, neck and neck. So I do have Tony Pollard here as projected being the third down back. But I think with all the first and second down work he's going to get, I would expect Tajay Spears to take upon this role, even though Pollard, to me, is just slightly better. It's not a significant difference in terms of, I think, the quality you're going to be getting on third down. So when you can throw in Tajay Spears there, and you've also opened yourself up because Tajay Spears is also a really good, just, hand the ball off to him back and let him make some magic there. As an 81, he's better than some starters that are out there in the league by my estimation. He's just caught in this stacked backfield right here with Tony Pollard. But I expect both of them to be really effectively used throughout this season. Tajay Spears, I think, might be a bit of a touchdown vulture here. Which, for people that have had Tony Pollard in fantasy, especially last year, getting a little bit of PTSD there from Tony Pollard basically being allergic to the end zone. To be honest, I would expect a lot more of that also, because I think, again, Tajay Spears will be taking on a lot of these passing situations. So look for him to get those quick screen passes, them split out in exit motion into like a tunnel screen situation. I would see a lot of that from Tajay Spears. And of course from Tony Pollard doing a lot of the first and second down work, then coming off the field inside the 15-yard line, you're giving Tajay Spears a lot of those chances, just because I think Tony Pollard will be doing a lot of the grunt work on first and second down early in drives to get them down the field. But it's a good problem to have if you're not a fantasy football owner of Tony Pollard, because to be ranked with this backfield, and it's a good safety blanket to have when you have a coach like Bill Callahan on your offensive line, who naturally I think is going to raise up the quality just a little bit, even maybe if you don't have the talent level. And when you have a young quarterback and you're trying to find your way, you're going to be wanting to put yourself in a situation where maybe you are running more than you might want to late in the season once you've sort of got your scheme dialed in with everyone involved. So this is a good safety blanket early in the year to keep the offense's motor running, to have these backs here. And to give Will Levis some confidence. You can always dump it down on a screen. And to constantly have a receiving threat out of the backfield the way that they're going to have, it's very difficult now for a defense to anticipate what you're going to do based upon who the running back is. Which, when you had Derrick Henry in there, you kind of knew that Derrick Henry was not going to be, running a Texas or anything like that. It was going to be, they were going to turn around, hand him the ball, or it was going to be like a really basic, play action screen pass to him or something. Now you've really got a good mixture of, now you got to coach up your linebackers and maybe a safety or something to watch what is going on here in the backfield. And I wouldn't even be surprised if you saw situations where both these guys were on the field at the same time, and you went sort of like into a smaller set with the three receivers out there, and then you get these two guys out there as well. I think you could see some of that too, and they're getting a little creative, again, just to try to manufacture some quality out of the offense early on in the season, make some defensive coordinators think, make the defensive players think, maybe attack younger defenses with those kinds of looks, because the variety that you're going to be able to put out there and the quality you're going to be able to put out there is actually really, really good. And you're also playing the 13th best wide receiver room in the league. It's DeAndre Hopkins, it's Calvin Ridley, and it's the most recently signed Tyler Boyd, who's going to play like a bigger slot role. And the ability to move these three guys around is going to be just, it's just so important to be able to play guys in a variety of different situations. We just talked about it with the running backs, and it's the same thing here. You can line up, DeAndre Hopkins is a traditional number one receiver, of course, but to have Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd, who can sort of move around everywhere, that bunch formation with these three guys out there could be deadly, absolutely deadly, because everyone's skill set here is also very different. DeAndre Hopkins, he's obviously going to gradually regress in terms of his ability. He's been in the league a long time, but he saw what Will Levis was able to do when Will Levis was comfortable in his use of DeAndre Hopkins, particularly in Will Levis's first game as a pro, to build upon that. And also now you're putting DeAndre Hopkins out there with other actual receiving threats. That's something that the Titans just didn't have last year. There was no real respect for anyone in that Titans receiving group except for DeAndre Hopkins. Now with Calvin Ridley, now with Tyler Boyd, you've bumped this number 2 and number 3 receiver on this team to now receiver 4, 5, even 6 to really round it out really well. You know, Kyle Phillips and Nick Westbrook-Ikhine and Treylon Burks were getting a lot of snaps that they probably shouldn't have been getting, particularly Nick Westbrook-Ikhine and Treylon Burks. Now that they're going to settle into more of like a backup role, you know, these 3 guys here, I think, are the perfect backups for the 3 guys that you got out there. And, you know, Kyle Phillips, I think, is pretty underrated. You know, Westbrook-Ikhine's not bad by any means, but he was your wide receiver. He was like your wide receiver 2 last year. So, of course, teams are going to be comfortable singling up on him. Treylon Burks has never really turned out to be who they were hoping for out of Arkansas. And now I think he's pushed so far down the depth chart that this could be really the end for him, the end of the road for him. Maybe he's able to figure out, carve out a role for himself here. But bringing in Tyler Boyd, I think, was pretty damning for him, because now he's competing for snaps in that situation with all 3 of these guys. I think Kyle Phillips and Westbrook-Ikhine can play that slot role pretty well also. So where does Treylon Burks fit in? They also, Jaquan Jackson, Bryce Oliver, who I think could develop if they make this team. I just do think that I would say that their bubble guys, I think Jackson and Oliver will probably be competing for a final roster spot here, like a special teams contributor. I would anticipate them participating a lot in the punt return and kick return drills throughout training camp and OTAs and all that, just because I feel like that's a good spot for them to be in to make the team, especially when you got Westbrook-Ikhine, Treylon Burks, who are maybe in their final year on the team. Maybe you can find your way into being into the starting roster next year as a more offensive weapon. But you're not going to beat out any of these 3 guys, it doesn't look like. You know, Tyler Boyd, I think, is extremely underrated, and him coming and joining the Brian Callahan, it's something. It's that little bit of continuity that, you know, Tyler Boyd understands all the roles in this playbook. So we talked about the inconsistencies we're going to see in the coaching staff. Tyler Boyd, I think, was brought in specifically to maybe be the glue between the players and the scheme to really help out as the coaches are trying to figure out the scheme as well throughout this spring and summer. He's going to come in. I think he's really going to help out, you know, Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins settle into those Jamar Chase, T. Higgins roles. I think he's going to really help out with some of these backup receivers figuring out, you know, calls and alerts and all that. I think that's a really, really important guy to have. And I would expect early on in the season for him to be that guy who makes a lot more plays than I think people are expecting just because of his experience in the system. I think he's going to find his way a lot better. And I think because he's coming in with so much knowledge of the system, it's going to help build trust with Will Levis. And naturally, I think that'll up his production a little bit more. And he's in the perfect role here with these 2 other guys playing the X and Z wide receiver roles on this team. So it's a great receiver group. It's a great weapons group in general so far. You know, it's just them finding their way with their rookie quarterback and their rookie head coach and their rookie offensive coordinator. You know, you got to gather and put it all together. Because then when you get to the tight end, it's the 16th ranked tight end with Chigakonkwo. He's also like a hybrid tight end fullback who's going to be used in a variety of ways as well. He's sort of like another one of those guys like Pollard and Tajay Spears who you can put him on the field and you don't really know what you're doing. You know, I think he can be a decent blocker. He can go and he can motion to the backfield and become a lead blocker in situations. You know, there's not a whole lot of depth behind him, which is a concern because you're going to want to use him as an up back in more like I formation situations and, strong I formations and goal line situations. So who are you getting to play those tight end roles? Are you bringing in more offensive linemen to do it? I think that should be a discussion with that. Maybe them bringing in a veteran in the during training camp, who's more of a high-end traditional blocking tight end. I think that could really help them out because then you can have Chigakonkwo on the field as a fullback, and then you can run maybe some more traditional 6-man fronts in terms of pass blocking, and Okonkwo then can split out. You can motion him away. There's a lot of variety you can use them in. That I just don't see you being able to do that with the current guys that you have. But I see a world where you got DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Chigakonkwo, Tajay Spears, and Tony Pollard on the field all at the same time, and defense is not knowing what to do. Who's the ball going to? Who are you committing to? And that's going to make the job of Will Levis a whole lot easier throughout the year. So they're coming in with the tied for 12th with the best pass blocking offensive line, tied for 12th. Lloyd Cushenberry, it's really anchored by him. He's the star there, one of the best centers in the league. Had a huge year last year, a lot of success. Next to him, you got last year's rookie Peter Skoronski, who I think is really going to settle in now at that left guard spot. Daniel Brunskill there on the right. Dylan Radunes, who not the best pass blocker, his play is really in the run game there. But J.C. Latham's got to be the focus, and that's the real project here for Bill Callahan, because as I said at the top, he's got that Evan Neal vibe going for him. I can't also assume he's going to be as bad as Evan Neal was his first 2 seasons. So I have to grade him out fairly, and that's a 72 grade here in pass blocking, which I think is a fair grade. You got one of the best offensive line coaches in the league, so I can't anticipate him being that bad. But his feet are a tremendous concern. The same way we saw it with Evan Neal. Going up against a lot of the speed rushers he's going to see, I would expect J.C. Latham to struggle early in the year. Now, that's not some big proclamation by any means. Most offensive tackles struggle in their rookie year. Most rookies in general struggle in their rookie years. But you have a group where you're going up against Josh Allen, and you better believe that they're going to pick on J.C. Latham until J.C. Latham shows them he's not somebody that can be picked on. Right? So you're going to see Will Anderson go against him. You're going to see Danielle Hunter go against him. You're going to see Josh Allen go against him. They are going to attack that left tackle spot that J.C. Latham is holding up. So it's going to be an early and often, a lot of stunts are coming his way. A lot of blitz packages are going to be set up to come his way. How he responds to that is going to really determine what kind of success this offense is going to have, because they have all those weapons on the offense, but if you don't get the time to get the ball in their hands down the field, then you might as well not have them, right? And when it comes to some of the depth here, they don't really have a lot of depth at the tackle position at all. Duncan, Watson, Petit Frere, they're not good. They have not been good, so they're really stuck with those 2 guys that they got. This is Jalen Duncan, Watson, and Petit Frere are basically what the floor, I think, for Evan Neal. Or for J.C. Latham. Well, Freudian slip there. So I don't anticipate them to get on the field at all. Because if J.C. Latham's going to be bad, he's not going to be any worse than they would be. I like Cole Spencer as this sort of underground 4th interior offensive lineman. I think Andrew Rupchich as well could be somebody that could find that role. Steve Charles, they're converting him left, right, and center from tackle to guard. I don't know how much he's going to make the team, but they don't really have a whole lot of threats here to beat out anyone for a starting job in training camp. So I think this is the most sure thing in terms of an offensive line that any of these bottom 10 teams are going to be putting out. As we go into the run blocking, they're the 10th best run blocking offensive line as well. Lloyd Cushenberry, Dylan Raduns, they're really great. Peter Skoronski, not so much. He's something he's going to have to work on. But you hope with his athleticism that he can figure it out. You're also putting him on the left side. Daniel Brunskill, the more the better run blocking offensive lineman. J.C. Latham, again, he's pretty good at all things. In the run game, you're hoping that, he can execute, open up some holes, him and Skoronski together. The size and the athleticism on that one side. You also got Lloyd Cushenberry, who you're going to see do a variety of things as well at that spot. Dylan Raduns, again, great run blocking tackle. So they're bookend with two good tackles, they hope. They got the center there and the anchor. Not a lot of depth, though, in terms of being able to produce much of a run block. Rubchich and Spencer, as good of replacement level players that they could be in pass blocking. And run blocking, you're really going to lose a lot if somebody goes down. Now, I know you got some grades there that are better than Peter Skoronski, but I anticipate Peter Skoronski to grow as time goes on. It's hard to anticipate how much growth that's going to see. But when you have, again, Bill Callahan, he's coming in, he's going to coach these guys up. And when you get these blue chip level talents like a Skoronski, for example, you can only see that type of improvement in the weakness of his game. And for a rookie interior lineman, he did not play terribly last year. Of course, he was much better in pass protection than he was in run blocking. But that's something that you really are targeting with any rookie offensive lineman. You want them to perform at a really good level in at least one aspect of the game. If they're struggling in both, then you're probably going to have some issues with them long term. But if they come out and they're great run blockers, they just aren't so great in pass protection, it's like, okay, let's target the pass protection growth in the off season. Let's dial that in. They got the run blocking down. That'll naturally grow. They seem to have a natural ability for that, or vice versa. Sort of like we saw with Skoronski, where the pass blocking sort of came more naturally than the run blocking. But now, again, he's got a great center next to him. He's got an absolute giant to his left, though a rookie. So I expect there to be some growth here. And then if there really isn't, then they just run the ball away from him. And, you got, three good guys to block on that side. And, Chigakonkwo is nothing to sneeze at in terms of being a blocker either, like we talked about. So it's a good offensive line that, with some really good coaching, could be great. My concern for them is they can't afford to pick up any injuries at all. And J.C. Latham's rookie hiccups could drag this offensive line down probably 5 to 7 spots in both run blocking and pass blocking, respectively, if J.C. Latham hits those same roadblocks that we saw from similar players early in their careers, like an Evan Neal. So just a quick positional summary here. Pretty good talent level from quarterback to offensive line. The depth of the offensive line and the tight end position is of a concern. I think they got really good depth in the backfield, really good depth at wide receiver. So those things are really going to help them. But again, my concern is you lose one of those offensive linemen, it could make things sort of spin out of control for a little bit. So you're really crossing your fingers that that offensive line can stay healthy and that J.C. Latham and Peter Skoronski on that left side can develop. Skoronski can continue to develop. Again, you've set them up for success with the coach that you got. So overall, they are tied for 14th. In overall offense for me. They're tied for 18th in passing offense, 77.3. And that's really just based on Will Levis, basically being a glorified rookie again, him trying to figure all this stuff out. It's real possible that with the quality that they have here, that they could be a top 10 offense by the end of the season. They already going to be a top 10 rushing offense, tied for 10th in rush offense. So they're going to be able to lean on that early on in the season. And then as Will Levis gets more comfortable, they're going to be able to attack in the passing game a lot more often as he gets some confidence. And they're going to have all the bodies in the world to be able to attack downfield effectively as the season progresses. Now let's move on to the defensive side of the football. And they are tied for 18th with edge rushers here. It's Harold Landry and Arden Key. Some balance here. You know, Harold Landry is sort of like an all-around edge rusher, 3-4 outside linebacker or whatever. Arden Key really has come into his own over the last couple of years. Had some struggles early in his career, but he sort of settled in now as being a good number 2 edge guy. They also picked up Jalen Harrell, who by my estimation is your third best edge rusher. I would expect him to find his way into a rotation because you don't really have a whole lot else going on in terms of guys who have the ability to rush the passer. It's just not there. And you're hoping that as time sort of goes on, you can get something. Maybe the new scheme is going to help Caleb Murphy, Thomas Rush, and Rashad Weaver. Maybe you have to go out and get somebody else in free agency. But overall, it's a good 1-2 punch to have with a good third guy coming in. That's going to cause some headaches here. You know, they're not super high end. Where they do get some stuff here, tied for 19th on the interior rush, Jeffrey Simmons and Tavondre Sweat, the rookie, who they stole based upon his little DWI situation. But it's the same type of idea here with the interior rush. Because you got Sebastian Joseph Day, who's sort of your third guy. So you are, again, sort of like with your edge group, you are looking for that depth that doesn't seem to exist right now. They've thrown a lot of bodies at the situation, so it'll be interesting to see who turns out to be that next guy in line, a really solid part of the defensive line front 4 rotation. Because you got Jeffrey Simmons, who's a stud. Not quite what he used to be, at his peak, but he can get back there. Some healthy seasons, put him back to back there. Some more help on the interior next to him. Tavondre Sweat blew people away at his workouts, blew people away at the combine. If he didn't have the legal issues, he probably would have been a late first round pick, early second round pick. So they really stole him. They stole a true 3-down defensive tackle who is really good in all aspects. He's somebody you can put at nose tackle, and he's going to be able to be a space eater in the run game. He's going to be able to, use some athleticism in pass rushing. There's just a concern about, he's not the most high-end guy in terms of that, and the depth is a big concern for this front 4 in general. Jalen Harrell's your next best guy, rookie, not a lot of experience, not drafted highly at all. So where are you getting the production from? Because I wouldn't necessarily count on it coming from Jalen Harrell unless he's like James Houston 2.0. You can't really anticipate that production coming despite the tools perhaps being there. There's a reason why he wasn't drafted highly. And then the same thing here with the interior. You drafted Tavondre Sweat, you got Sebastian Joseph Day in there, but where's the other depth coming from? I just don't know that it exists with the current state that they have with their front 4. Now taking a look at their linebackers and coverage. They're tied for 11th, and they're doing it with 2 rookies. Converted safety to linebacker James Williams from the University of Miami and Cedric Gray from the University of North Carolina. I really, really like these guys coming onto the field in passing situations. James Williams in particular, he's a giant of a human. I think he's weighing in now at 230, 235 at 6'4", 6'5", or something like that. Just absurd measurables. So he's going to have that size and athleticism to be able to match up with tight ends and, hopefully be a physical force out there against some of the smaller guys. He's a big human. And Cedric Gray, a more traditional linebacker, is going to have to work on some of his early down work. But I think you can put him out there and let him use some athleticism on third down, play in the passing game, play quarterback spy role. I think that could happen quite effectively. Otis Reese, Garrett Wallow, Jack Gibbons. There is some little bit of depth there. They got Kenneth Murray, who I'm just not a fan of at all. Jojo Doman, it's just kind of is what it is. Luke Gifford, Chance Campbell. Not every one of these guys is going to make the team. They might hold more quote-unquote linebackers if they view James Williams as more of like a big safety. They are bringing over the Baltimore Ravens defensive backs coach, like we talked about at the top. Could James Williams be used more of like a Kyle Hamilton role? I think that has to be considered and put on the table. But I think on these third down situations, James Williams will find his way onto the field just because of his versatility. And then Cedric Gray, this will be, I think, where he really gets opportunities. Though I would more anticipate. It's tough to say, but this is where I think, again, as the season goes on, you could get a lot of production out of these guys, and I understand playing a lot of rookies, and that's why, being ranked as low as they are in the overall scheme of things, despite having these levels of talent, I think is what's glaring right now. But this is what a quote-unquote rebuild looks like. You put in these types of players, and like the production you could potentially get, it's so there's something there. There is something there. You just gotta grit your teeth and get through some of the growing pains that you're going to see, blown coverages and whatnot, because an overall talent level, they're your two best guys, I think, by far. And they have the tied for 11th cornerback group here. They picked up L'Jarius Sneed in a trade with the Kansas City Chiefs and Chidobe Awuzie in free agency to pair up here with Roger McCreary, who's going to get a lot of slot work. It's a great 1-2 punch here with this group. Sneed and Awuzie, you really did a great job of quickly rebuilding this cornerback group, who I think matches up really well, especially within the division, with the Michael Pittman, with Adonai Mitchell, Brian Thomas, Gabe Davis. Who else is out there for them? Christian Kirk, Nico Collins, Tank Dell. You got your guy who can go out there and cover Stephon Diggs, L'Jarius Sneed. So you've done a good job combating a lot of the work that was done within your division here. I really like this group. Obviously, they could be a little bit better. They could have like a more high-end cornerback, but they got two potentially cornerback ones here. Chidobe Awuzie probably on the lower end there. I'd say L'Jarius Sneed more like in the middle of the pack. There is a reason why Kansas City was able to let him go, because they did have Trent McDuffie and those kind of guys available. But even when you get into some of the depth here, Jarvis Brownless Jr. was a great pickup for a backup slot guy. Robert Javier, I think, is going to be extremely underrated. And you got Caleb Farley, a former first-round pick, who injuries never really allowed him to shine. But you got three guys there on your bench, kind of like your wide receiver group, who you got some good depth behind these guys. Obviously, Caleb Farley could develop into being a top cornerback. You draft him in the first round. He had those projections before all those injury concerns kicked in. So there's a lot of potential here. And to have this many corners with this type of variety of skill set, now when you go up against other teams, you're going to be able to do some mixing and matching here. Roger McCreary might be able to go and play some safety, for example. Instead, you can get Jarvis Brownless Jr. if he really starts to show out and slide into that slot role. You could probably get Caleb Farley on the field. And then, L'Jarius Sneed or Chidobe Awuzie or whatever can kick inside as well. There's a lot of variety that you have here. I think they did a really good job of building up this cornerback room to be a good mix of experience, and then the potential, because you don't need to worry about Jarvis Brownless Jr. and Robert Javier right now. Even Gabe, Judy, Lally, you don't need to worry about them if Lally makes the team. You don't need to worry about them getting significant reps unless something terribly goes wrong, because you got 4 guys who have NFL experience who are all capable. 3 of them are better than them, and then Caleb Farley, I'd say, is sort of in that same sort of tier as it stands right now, just because he hasn't really put the production out there and hasn't really developed because of injuries and all that kind of stuff. He never really hasn't been able to get it going. But if he does get it going, holy crap, you got potentially the best cornerback room in the NFL, which is countered by one of the worst safety rooms in the entire league, 31st in the NFL. And this is why you bring in the guy that you brought in, Denard Wilson from Baltimore, because no one got more out of safety rooms in particular than he did in Baltimore. And he's not inheriting the greatest group here with Amani Hooker and Elijah Molden. 31st. It could be worse, but not by much. We'll just say that. It could be worse, not by much. So this is where the real battle for him begins. That safety support over the top. Elijah Molden still trying to find his way as a safety. Was a nickel corner, converted him to safety. Still trying to find his way. Amani Hooker sort of had a good year next to Kevin Byard, but now has to take over as a number 1 safety. Not an ideal situation. This is where I think James Williams could come into play in this safety room, potentially. He's still projected to be a linebacker as it stands right now. But as training camp goes on, James Williams could potentially find his way into being a safety, just to really help out the back end. Maybe put a more traditional linebacker in that spot and let Williams play that Kyle Hamilton role. Because right now that Kyle Hamilton role probably goes to Amani Hooker. I'm guessing. But I think James Williams is the perfect guy to play it. So I don't know if throughout they'll end up converting him back to safety. But he was picked up as a linebacker. So I don't know what the initial thought process is here. But when this is the group that you're putting out there, you're putting a lot of faith in your defensive coach, your defensive coordinator, and your position coaches to turn this talent group around with just scheme and strategies and assignments. It could be rough. It's rough. It's not great. I don't like it at all. There's no depth whatsoever. Keaton Ellis, rookie. Hard for him to make the roster of any other team. Same thing with Anthony Kendall, and those are your 2 best backups. So I would look to see the amount of guys that they have playing linebacker. I would look for James Williams to at some point be back at his safety role that he played at the University of Miami, to maybe make this a more well-rounded defensive group. Moving on to the run defense. This is now the edge room versus the run, and they're 30th in the NFL against the run. They don't really got anything going on here. They got 2 rookies who, again, not ideal for them to be your best depth, considering they weren't exactly day 1, day 2 draft picks here. So you're going to get find a rotation here. And if it's the 2 rookies, it's going to be tough with setting the edge here against the run. You're going to run into teams that have really good tackles and pulling guards and whatnot that I think are going to eat you alive potentially here. Even when you get to the interior guys, it's the 15th for run stuffers. But where are you getting the depth from? I mean, it's a much better rotation than what you had with the pass. Jeffrey Simmons, as he's getting older, that early down work is going to be tougher and tougher. Tavondre Sweat is an absolute beast, an absolute mauler there on early downs. But it's your top 4 defensive linemen are also your best options in all aspects of the game, and you can't just keep these guys on the field all game. So you got to find the depth here. You got to find the guys that can come in and be a replacement level. Quentin Bohanna, Keandre Colburn. Are those the guys that you're going to be subbing in on early downs and potentially just get absolutely run through? Or is T'Vondre Sweat so incredibly valuable there on first and second down that's his role and he comes off the field on third down more often than not? Is Jeffrey Simmons, is this where Jeffrey Simmons is then not seeing so much of the field? First down, maybe second down. And you get Quentin Bohanna, you get Keandre Colburn, you get Sebastian Joseph Day, you're hoping can turn it around. This is where you're starting to get the issues with this defense. Because we just saw a pretty high-end pass defense, but then now you're getting into, they got the talent there, but now how does what they can do on early downs affect that? And this is where it starts to happen. Big boys getting tired, running them into the ground, getting hurt, having to come off the field for a drive or two, and then offenses being able to absolutely exploit it because you just don't have the depth, and in the depth you don't have a lot of experience, particularly in the edge group. So how they navigate this is going to be the true test for Denard Wilson and his defensive staff, because it looks great on paper, but you got to put it into practice for 60 minutes a week. So that's where the issue comes into play here. So here's their linebacker group. It's Wallow and Gibbons are your 2 best early down linebackers. Tied for 19th in the NFL. James Williams and Cedric Gray, you're not going to get a whole lot from them on early downs in their rookie year. This is another reason why I think James Williams is just better suited going back to safety. I don't know why they picked him up as a linebacker. Otis Reese seems to be the best in terms of, the ultimate rotational linebacker on this team. I expect him to see the field quite a bit, even though he's not top 2 in the run or in the pass. I expect him to see the field quite often. He's definitely got a place in there. He's got a place in that linebacker rotation for sure. But still tied for 19th. Not a great group here. And it's going to be tough because almost Otis Reese might almost be the linebacker 1 on this team, just because the skill sets are so hot and cold when it comes to certain players. With Wallow and Gibbons, not great against the pass. This is where they really shine, is on early downs. James Williams and Cedric Gray, not great at all against the run. So do you want them out there on anything other than clear passing situations? And so I would anticipate Otis Reese to maybe get the green dot and be the guy out there for a majority of the snaps. So you do take a little bit of a step back in both aspects of linebacker play because of that. But I also think that you might get a little bit more consistency as well in certain situations where guys get caught on the field when they shouldn't be. Because I think you're going to see a lot of that from this linebacker group, just because, like I said, the skill sets are so hot and cold, so night and day for each of these players seemingly. And running through here with some DB run support, again, they're the 25th, so they're a little bit better in run support compared to the rest of the league than they are in pass coverage, but still not a good group. It's just not a good group. The depth for early down work with Mike Brown is much better. I would expect him to almost maybe be on the field on early downs. Maybe Elijah Molden drops into the slot in these situations because he is a little bit better in run support than some of the actual corners that you got. So maybe that's how you make it up on early downs there. Maybe Elijah Molden gets a lot more comfortable in that situation as well. But, Amani Hooker, it's how they work out the secondary with the cornerback room that's so good. To have this as a complement is this is where they need to really work. The depth on the defensive line and the front seven is really important. Getting more solid, well-rounded players, I think, as depth pieces there is a worry. And then just getting a high-end safety of any kind should be the next move. I'm shocked they weren't able to land Geno Stone, who would have at least been a great contributor in one aspect here and really rose this group up quite a bit. But he ended up in Cincinnati, so you let him get away despite bringing in the guy who really made his career, which I'm shocked. I'm shocked. I wonder if they made an offer to him. I'm not 100% sure whether they did or not. As it stands, it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't, because I would expect him to go there. But yeah, this group is just this is the group that's really going to drag them down in terms of their overall ranking. So just running through the positional summaries again. This is, again, safety is glaring and the depth is glaring in terms of just not good. It's just not good. As a just pure best 11 guys, they got a pretty good defense. Once you get the guy 13, 14, 15, 16 on this defensive side of the ball, it's a steep drop. And it's a steep drop, particularly in that front four, which is a tremendous concern because you do have Harold Landry, who has an injury history. If he goes down again, Arden Key's your number one edge guy for all 3 downs, and then who's your number 2? Who's coming in? Is it Jalen Harold, a rookie? It's just not a good situation to be in. What if T'Vondre Sweat, I got him projected really high here. If he doesn't pan out, that really changes the entire look of that interior group as well. So the strength of the group, I'd say, is the corner room. It's where the most consistency lies. But man, oh man, it's a rough situation. So overall, their defense is ranked 26th in the league, 72.52 ranking. They're 22nd against the pass, 74.4. And then against the run, tied for 30th, 69.7. Again, the depth concerns are significant. The back end with the safety group is so glaring. How they mix and match their linebackers to make sure they get the best ones on the field to not get completely exploited is a tremendous concern. How do you work that front four rotation to make sure you get the highest amount of production? I think, again, pure players, top 11, great. You can't have them on the field the whole game, and that's the pitfall here. So just taking in the overall rank, 29th in the league, 74.44. Coaching, they get a 73 grade, tied for 29th. Total offense, tied for 14th. This is the real shining spot here, 76.74. And then the total defense, they're ranked 26th for all the reasons that I just listed previously. A lot of optimism, though. I would have a lot of optimism for this team as the season goes on. As we get into next year, that's where I think the optimism comes for this team. I wouldn't be all doom and gloom if I was a Titans fan. I would just temper the expectations for this year, anticipate a lot of issues, anticipate a lot of games where nothing goes right. And then I would also anticipate games, especially late in the year, for you guys to maybe steal a game or two from, teams that are those playoff bubble teams that are maybe looking past you a little bit and sort of looking at the Titans as, that preseason, write the W in so we can focus on Kansas City, for example, or Houston in their own division and not so much worry about the Titans. We got that one. I'd expect later in the year for those teams to maybe start regretting that. And there it is, my number 29 team in my 2024 NFL Deep Dive Series, the Tennessee Titans. I hope you enjoyed. If you made it this far, just hit the like, the thumbs up. Even if you hate all my opinions, you made it this far, just help me out. Maybe more people will now see it and be on your side, that I suck, or that I'm a genius. And leave that comment in the comment section below. I try to respond to all of them. I try. And subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys with the next video next time. There's the series that's already occurred on either side of my head.